Welcome to SQL Handbook. My name is Shashain, and in this video, we're going to talk about what is the difference between the where and having clause in SQL. Now, this is a very talked about and common SQL interview question, especially for beginner SQL interviews or entry-level SQL interviews. I know some people get confused by this and how it works. A textbook answer to give when someone asks this question is where is used to filter rows and having is used to filter groups. But I understand as a beginner that might not make a lot of sense, because you might be thinking to yourself, okay, so I can use where to filter rows, so can't I just use it to filter grouped rows as well? Like isn't a group just a row that I can filter as well? So not quite. And I'll explain that in this video, and I hope it makes a bit more sense. And I will show you the logic on why we say where is used to filter rows and having used to filter groups. And keep in mind, we should be saying individual rows, because as I've said, when you put the rows together, it makes a group, but I'll explain that in a second. All right, so now we're going to start with this table called sales records. It's a simple table that I've made, and you can see that it's got 10 rows and 3 columns. Basically, the table just holds sales people's names and the region where they work and amount they've sold in that region. Okay, so very straightforward. So now my first task is to find all sales in the East region. Okay, so that's a very simple query to write up. We're just selecting the columns from the table, and then we're just using the where clause to filter these records for where the region is just East, right? And then we get these 4 records back. These are all the salespeople that work in the East region. So that's quite straightforward. You might be looking at this and thinking like this makes perfect sense because it's not that complicated. Okay, I get that. So this is an example where is used to filter rows. Now for this query over here, find the total amount sold in each region and make sure the total is greater than 25,000. All right. So in this one, we have to use a group by, because we have to find the total amount sold in each region, right? So we have to group the data by region. So I'm selecting region, and then I'm using the aggregate function called sum on the amount sold column. So that will give me the total sold amount for each region, right? So I say from the sales records table, I say then group by region, and then I use a having clause on that sum amount sold where it's greater than 25,000. Okay, so now if I run this, I get the region East and West and the total sold for those 2 values. Now I don't get back the other regions. So if I were to show you how many regions there are specifically, region from sales records. Here we go. I get East, North, and West, right? So there's 3 regions, but my query over here only returns back 2 of those regions. Now, if I were to run this query without the having clause, you'll see that I get my data back with those 3 regions, East, North, and West, and the total sold amount per region in this column over here. Now, when I use the having clause, I can filter these groups, because understand this is group data, right? We group the data on region, and the way we grouped it is by summing up the entire amount sold column, which is now called the total sold column. Okay, so why can't I do this with the where clause? For example, if I were to take this exact same thing, I put it after the from, because it's just syntax, right? To put the where clause, you have to put it between the from, after the from clause and before the group by. Okay, so I'm just going to run this now. So I'm not going to run the whole thing, just this part where I'm saying select these columns from this table where the sum of this amount sold is greater than 25,000 and group by region. If I run this, I get an error message. It says aggregate may not appear in the where clause unless it is in a subquery containing a having clause or a select list, and the column being aggregated is in an outer reference. Okay, so what this tells me is that now the where clause, I can't be using it with the aggregate function like sum in this scenario, and that is because the aggregate functions are used on groups. Okay, we can use aggregate functions on grouped data. Now, If you go back to my earlier video where I spoke about the logical process in order of a SQL query, you'll know that logically a SQL query is not executed from top to bottom. So it doesn't start with select, then goes to from, then where. It doesn't work like that. It starts at from. Okay, so it's from, where, group by, having, select, then order by, right? This is the general logical order of a SQL query when it comes to processing. Now, it's not how we write it, but it's how we process the data in the database engine. So if we start at the from clause, right, we get this data over here from sales records. Then right out of the from clause, we go to the where clause. Now, this is why we say where is used to filter individual rows. Individual rows. Did I spell that correctly? Individual? Yeah, I did. Okay. So this is where, so the where clause is used to filter the individual rows returned by the from clause. Because it's the next phase that follows the from clause. Okay. So that's why we say we can use where to filter individual rows. Once those rows are filtered with the from clause, with the where clause, then we can group the data, right? This is where we group data by region, for example. And then after the data is grouped, that's when we have the having clause. That's why we can't use the where clause to filter these groups, because the grouping is applied after the where is finished, right? So logically speaking, to filter the groups that are applied here, so this is where grouping is done. Then once the grouping is done and when we have our groups, then if we want to filter those groups, we can do that here. Filter groups in the having clause. So this logical order of processing is the reason why we say where is used to filter individual rows and having is used to filter groups. Okay, I hope that makes sense, and I hope this gives a bit more context to understanding the logic behind the differences of the where and having clause. So next time you go into an SQL interview and you have to answer this question, instead of just saying, yeah, where is used to filter rows and group by and having is used to filter groups, you can actually say like the reason why that is because based on the logical order of processing. And then you can explain all the things I just mentioned over here. When you do this, the interviewer is going to understand, right, this guy knows what he's talking about and he has a bit more in-depth knowledge on the topic. It makes you look good as well. So yeah, hope that helps. Give a like for this video if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys in the next video.